my fellow Americans, it has been the honor of my life to serve you. I won't stop. In fact, I will be right there with you as a citizen for all my remaining days. But for now, whether you are young or whether you're young at heart, I do have one final ask of you as your president. The same thing I asked when you took a chance on me 8 years ago. I'm asking you to believe, not in my ability to bring about change, but in yours.
Unusual farewell address there for President Obama for 20,000 people in Chicago, breaking a tradition right there. He's also going to have a press conference this week in his final days. Let's talk about all the politics now with our chief White House correspondent, John Karl, Republican strategist Sara Fagen, Democratic pollster Cornell Boettcher, author of the new book, Black Man in the White House, Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard, Katrina vanden Heuvel of The Nation. Thanks to all of you for being here. And we've got to begin, John, with this extraordinary firestorm yesterday. John Lewis questions legitimacy of President-elect Trump. You saw that tweet back, and it has sort of engulfed this transition in the last 24 hours.
Incredible how unnecessary it was, because, you know, John Lewis was articulating something that most Democrats simply aren't, calling Trump illegitimate, saying he wasn't going to go to the inauguration. And they won't. I mean, the former presidents are going to be there, the Clintons are going to be there, Jimmy Carter's going to be there. But look, if Donald Trump needs a lesson in John Lewis and what he has done beyond talk, he could ask his own vice president. Mike Pence went to Selma in 2010 with John Lewis, was there on the Pettus Bridge, talked about him as somebody who has the moral authority and courage that continues to inspire millions of Americans. I mean, this is really, he really created something that he didn't need to do.
It doesn't seem like anyone around him can stop those early morning tweets. But you also saw Reince Priebus there, right there, say that John Lewis is being irresponsible. He should grow up. Democrats should tell him to stop.
They're not handling the John Lewis flap the right way, clearly. John Lewis is a hero and a civil rights hero. But they are right in saying that, you know, Donald Trump is the legitimate president. He won fair and square. He didn't win the election because of Russian interference. And they do have a responsibility to stand up for that. It's just the way they do it that's the wrong approach.
He's someone who with less than a plurality of the vote, and it doesn't make sense the way it unfolded. Well,
he's got a plurality. He doesn't have a majority.
Well,
no, he actually lost.
No, he doesn't have a plurality.
No, excuse me. Yes. Take it back.
With less than a plurality of the vote. Now he is the president. I mean, the electoral college said the electoral college said that he's the president. He's the president. But as a president, you also have to build. And if I'm sitting there in part of his team, and I go, look, we're probably not going to win the next election with 46% of the vote. So people like John Lewis and all these other groups, you have to start building bridges towards. This week was a disaster because he is burning bridges, not building them. And
he's got to think about those poll numbers, 44% approval in Gallup.
Yeah, it was unnecessary. Cornell mentioned this week. I would say until Saturday, and taking aside a couple of other of his tweets, it was a pretty good week for the Trump administration in the sense that a lot of moderates and liberals won't agree with all the cabinet picks. But if you saw General Mattis and General Kelly and Senator Sessions and Mr. Tillerson and Congressman Pompeo testifying, you thought, look, this is a reasonable, more than reasonable, I would say, cabinet.
Well, you saw so many issues where they didn't agree with the president-elect.
Right. No, well, that's good. That's healthy. And if you're an uncertain, a Trump skeptic, you think, you know what, this administration is going to be better than I expected. I would say, as a Trump skeptic, I would say, watch it. The net of this week for me was the administration could be better than expected. Decent policies conducted competently by people, but the White House and the president himself the president remains very worrisome, alarming almost. I mean, the fact that he can't discipline. Don't you think?
I do think
it could be a decent administration.
Let us agree that Donald Trump is alarming. Donald Trump is a bully who thrives on division. Martin Luther King weekend, he takes on John Lewis. John Lewis did more in one day on the Edmund Pettus Bridge than Donald Trump ever will do to make America great again. And anyone who has, I don't want to call it audacity, it's too good a term, to appoint Jefferson Beauregard Session as Attorney General should damn well be respectful of John Lewis. I'm surprised John Lewis didn't invoke the suppression of voting rights in this election. I still think it's one of the most underreported stories. Moving forward, we're already seeing in the last 3 weeks Republican governors trying to suppress the vote. And that, I think, contributed to the outcome. And
what he did invoke, though, is Russia. And we saw some other steps on that this week in John Karl. We saw the president-elect say for the first time he accepted the conclusion, even though he seemed to take it back just a few sentences later. And now you've got the Senate investigation. Comey wouldn't confirm whether or not he's investigating, but a lot of people believe that they are still looking at it. So this issue's not going away.
No, the Senate Intelligence Committee is investigating this. After Senator Burr, the chairman of the committee, said that they wouldn't go in the direction he came out, he backed down. They are investigating this. Specifically, they're investigating whether or not there were any contacts between the Trump campaign and Russian officials during the course of the campaign. There's no evidence that there was, but they're going to be investigating that. But the extraordinary thing that we saw here is the incoming National Security Advisor, Michael Flynn, basically having a text messages back and forth with the Russian ambassador to the United States. I mean, they're exchanging Christmas greetings on Christmas Day, and then, of course, having a phone conversation just as President Obama was imposing the sanctions.
George, okay, so I do believe there needs to be an investigation of the intelligence community's findings, classified findings, in order to ensure the electoral integrity of our system moving forward. But this country needs to take a deep breath. We are a strong, resilient nation, and the idea that the Russians hacked our election needs to be investigated. There's very little evidence at the moment except for the DNC servers. But the larger point is, it seems to me, it is simply sober realism. It is not pro-Trump, nor is it pro-Putin, who is an authoritarian leader, to argue that it is in the United States' national security interest to have a working relationship with Russia, to de-escalate a nuclear arms race. Bill Clinton's defense secretary, William Perry. I agree that we need a working relationship with Russia to de-escalate a nuclear arms race, to resolve the crisis in Syria. I think it is a good thing that the United States will now be a party to the talks to resolve a metastasizing crisis in Syria, which will destabilize Europe.
Being able to communicate is one thing, but two presidents have tried this. You know, the current president and my former boss, George W. Bush, tried to have a relationship with Russia, and he has grown, Vladimir Putin has grown more aggressive. And, you know, with so much coverage of Donald Trump's tweets and John Lewis, you know, Poland right now is celebrating the arrival of NATO troops led by Americans. Donald Trump is getting set up for a potential very challenging first year of his administration with respect to Russia, because you have Americans leading NATO troops in one Baltic state and Poland, and you know, and this is, what does he do now? Given what's happened with this faulty report, given his bromance with Vladimir Putin, given what's going on in Syria, what does he do when there is a altercation with the Russian soldier?
And that's one of the questions. And Bill Kristol, we now some talk now of an early summit with Vladimir Putin, maybe in the next several months. It put me in mind of that early summit between John F. Kennedy and Nikita Khrushchev early in his administration, which kind of shocked President Kennedy. Right. Is Donald Trump ready for this?
Well, I hadn't thought of that analogy, but you're right. And what happened? The lesson Khrushchev took from that summit was that Kennedy was weak, because I think he wasn't very well prepared. And it led to the Cuban Missile Crisis, which was the most dangerous moment of the Cold War. I don't agree with Katrina that Trump's being such a nice guy to Putin is a wonderful thing. And I do think it's genuinely alarming. The only person Donald Trump treats with respect, he doesn't treat his political enemies with respect, he doesn't treat the Republican Party with respect, he doesn't treat the American Constitution with respect, he obviously doesn't treat the media with respect. Who's the one guy he never criticizes? Who's the one guy he even seems to defer to? Vladimir Putin.
Wait a minute.
That is alarming.
The lesson is also Ronald Reagan. I have to remind you of Ronald Reagan's meeting with Gorbachev.
And
Ronald Reagan considered
1985
first summit in Geneva.
I think,
but let me just say one thing.
5 years into his term, after he showed
I am
toughness.
concerned that Donald Trump walks into the White House a walking conflict of interest in violation of the Emoluments Clause, the Constitution, the Stock Act. It is important to investigate whether there are financial levers, not just Russia, China, the Emirates, because he will never make America great again. I don't believe he ever will, but he will not do so if he is beholden to foreign powers.
Cornell,
so level,
yes. we heard Congressman Chaffetz there. He didn't seem all that eager to dive into this.
No, he didn't. One of the things I think Americans are going to be hearing and learning a lot about is this emolument sort of clause, which other than us on this around this table, most Americans are going, "What the heck is that?"
I was going, "What the heck is that?" I don't know.
It's the Constitution.
You're better educated on this than I am.
Right? No, I was listening to that interview, you know, but there's conflict after conflict, and certainly, look, as taking my partisan hat off, this is certainly not a way that you want to sort of enter or start your presidency. This emolument stuff isn't going away. It was interesting that the congressman said, "Oh, there's not, he hasn't even been, sworn in, so we should wait for him to get sworn in and break the law before we do anything about it." It doesn't make any sense. This is something that's going to be brewing, and our Congress is going to be swept up in this because Democrats certainly aren't going to let this go away.
I don't think that hotel rooms are the issue here. I mean, Donald Trump is going to donate the money back to the Treasury. The bigger issue, which is unknown, is are there big investments in Trump properties, in the Trump business by sovereign wealth funds, foreign governments?
And we've come full circle. You don't know if you don't see the tax returns.
And so that's why this isn't going away. But as we sit here and talk about this today, most Americans are focused on the Ringling Brothers circus going out of business, not on the emoluments clause. And Donald Trump is going to get a lot of leeway with respect to until there is something that is discovered that is
of his time in office. But there is a point that, the American people knew exactly who they were voting for. This was a guy with vast international holdings. He was a guy with vast business interests.
Yes and no. Yes, they knew he had vast, but they did not have the information in the tax returns.
Which is unprecedented. I mean, it's the first time in U.S. history a presidential candidate has not revealed his tax returns, or a president. I think that the poll ratings are in the gutter right now, right? Donald Trump's, even before he's been inaugurated. Those poll ratings go south. I think you have a Republican Party ready to, begin different kinds of hearings that Mr. Chavez is unwilling to have.
Well, they may not be
very happy with Michael Pence as president.
It may take time for that, but I do have a question there on Obamacare and where this is going next. They got these first votes, which is basically just saying, let's move the debate forward. But you do have a fair amount of nervousness among Republicans on Capitol Hill about what to do going forward, and some fears that if they repeal without having a full replacement in place, they could own what will be a difficult issue.
The repealing and replacing of Obamacare is very complicated. It is what a White House and congressional leadership, a serious White House and serious congressional leadership should meet on and work on and figure out a strategy of it. It may work and it may not. Obviously, not every administration gets things through, even when they have much larger majorities in Congress and a much larger popular vote than Donald Trump had. And I think that's one of the things that's alarming to me is and I think Trump supporters seem to believe he won, huge upset, all credit to him, and he's got the wind at his back. And Republicans on the Hill do want him to succeed, obviously.